All right, everyone. Welcome to another edition of The Danny Show. I'm your host, Daniel Cody, and this is where I give commentary and reviews on all things wrestling. And as you all can see by this special outfit, today is 316 Day. But before I get started with that, I want to first of all thank all of you because we have reached 100. Thank you guys so much for that. With that being said, Stone Cold Steve Austin has a birthday on December 18th. That happens to be on the same day as Trish Stratus and RVD. And some of you have already seen, 36 of you have already seen the review I did on all three of them in one video. But today, just so I can have room for RVD in December of this year, I'm going to use 316 Day to do my favorite matches of Stone Cold Steve Austin. Unfortunately, I don't have a Sprite with me, so guys, put some drink emojis. I'm straight edge, but put some soda emojis or something in the comment section below to tribute. But either way, let's get started with my favorite top 10 matches from Stone Cold Steve Austin on 316 Day. That way, RVD can have a day to himself. But either way, let's get started at number 10 with Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Owen Hart at Survivor Series 1997. Now, as we all know, this was a return match and a redemption match for the Intercontinental Championship, which came a couple of months, about 3 or 4 months prior to SummerSlam, after SummerSlam. And this was when the infamous pile driver happened, which broke Stone Cold's neck and almost put him out of action forever. But he kept coming back, and including that memorable moment in New York City where he told the boss, "You can kiss my butt." But either way, moving on, it was a good match to watch. It was a mixed reaction because they were in, of course, Montreal. So a lot of fans were for Stone Cold, some were for Owen Hart, but it was a good match to watch. And Stone Cold won back the Intercontinental Championship from the late Owen Hart. Keep Owen in mind because I'm going to mention him a little bit later. Next on this list, we have Triple H versus Stone Cold Steve Austin at Survivor Series 2000. Now, even though the Three Stages of Hell was awesome, I'm going to include this match on the list for a couple of reasons. Number one, it wasn't a match that Stone Cold lost. And if you follow my channel, you know that I try to include more matches that were won, especially when we're attributing to somebody for their birthday. But either way, nobody actually won this match, but it was very fun to watch, and that it was brutal. And one fun fact, WWE is the only place where you can drink on the job, and not only drink on the job, but it's also a place where you can drink during a match. Now, you'll never see a UFC superstar, or a UFC fighter, should I say, drinking during a fight, or drinking before a fight for that matter. But in WWE or WWF at the time, during the Attitude Era, you could do such a thing. But what makes this match so special for this list is the ending of the match, where Triple H was dropped off of one of those motor machine one of those motor operating machines, and Stone Cold took the cart and just dropped it. And what made it even more funny was Triple H selling the whole thing like, "No, don't, holy shit." That is entertaining every single time. Next, at number 8, we have Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Mr. McMahon at the St. Valentine Day Massacre. It wasn't an epic match, I know. But the simple fact that we got to watch Stone Cold Steve Austin give a long awaited, overdue beatdown to Mr. McMahon made this match so fun to watch. And we all know Mr. McMahon had a plan. That's why he kept trying to provoke Austin to stay in the cage and not escape. He was willing to take a beating so that Big Show at the time, going by his real name, Paul White, as he does in AEW, interfered in the match, and it worked against his favor because what he meant, it's like the good book says, what you meant for wrong was made for right, because what was meant to destroy Stone Cold helped Stone Cold win the match. As Big Show threw him through the cage, Austin escapes and he wins. At number 7, we have Stone Cold Steve Austin at No Mercy 2001, taking on RVD and Kurt Angle. It was a great triple threat match that I really enjoyed. We got to see Kurt Angle. No, before Brock Lesnar, Kurt Angle was the original mayor of Suplex City, and this was during the WWE versus the Invasion era. WWE, Kurt Angle represented, with RVD and Stone Cold representing the alliance, and RVD being the wild card because everyone wanted to know who RVD was going to frog splash. Eventually, he would frog splash Stone Cold Steve Austin, but it was broken up by Kurt Angle. And we saw a lot. We also saw in some wild card action Shane and Vince fight it off. Why did they release Shane? But either way, Shane and Vince fought on the outside as Stone Cold stunned, I believe, RVD for the pinfall. Nonetheless, regardless of who he stunned, we saw a lot of stuff. We saw some technical suplex action. We saw some high flying action with Kurt Angle doing a moonsault and landing it successfully because he does not do that often. But either way, despite all that, Stone Cold was able to retain the championship at No Mercy. And ironically, the show is somewhat named after him, with the t-shirt saying, "Expect No Mercy." Next on this list, we have Stone Cold Steve Austin facing off against one of my all-time favorites, another Texan set to be at this year's Hall of Fame, The Undertaker, at SummerSlam 1998 on the Highway to Hell. Now, I will say this, every summer I traditionally go on the Highway to Hell. No, Mom, not that highway, but not literally. But either way, I usually watch what is called the Highway to Hell build up to SummerSlam with Stone Cold, Steve Austin, and The Undertaker, including matches from King of the Ring 98, and of course, what was that? Yeah. I forgot what that breakdown, DX breakdown, where Stone Cold and Undertaker teamed up against Kane and Mankind. But either way, their match at SummerSlam was great. Even though Stone Cold admitted, I did not know this, he doesn't remember the match. There was a particular moment during the match where Undertaker, and I don't know why he does this, but Undertaker has a thing for Irish whipping opponents into the rope, lowering his head down to go for a back body drop, and his opponents would catch him, kick him, and because he's the Undertaker, he stands up like nothing ever happened. However, when he was set to stand up like nothing happened, like the kick didn't hurt him, he ended up hitting Stone Cold in the chin with the back of his head. And after that, Stone Cold did not remember anything else that happened that night, which is similar to what happened with Undertaker and Brock Lesnar in one of the most sad matches in WWE history, WrestleMania 30. But either way, despite not having a lot of memory, Stone Cold put on an incredible performance and retained the championship at Madison Square Garden in New York City. Moving on to number 5, a match that took place a few months prior in that year at another one of WWE's fourfold pay-per-views, WrestleMania. This WrestleMania, at number 5, we have Stone Cold versus Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 14. This would be a match that saw Stone Cold Steve Austin win his first ever WWE Championship. Now, while he does admit that was not his favorite run, his first championship wasn't his favorite one for whatever reason, I still enjoyed this match, and I really enjoyed watching Shawn Michaels have his last match in 5 years with Stone Cold Steve Austin. And fun fact, Shawn Michaels had did not want to lay down. He has a saying he doesn't lay down for anyone, but he was supposed to do exactly what he did, which was book for him to put Stone Cold over. He didn't want to do it. And of course, fun fact, one of my all time favorites, this year's Hall of Famer, The Undertaker, made sure that Shawn Michaels did it. You probably heard the story of The Undertaker saying if Shawn didn't put Stone Cold over, it was going to be a long night for Shawn Michaels. Not to mention, he already had a bad back. So, wrestling with Stone Cold and not putting him over, and then meeting The Undertaker in the back, not a good night for you, ever. But nonetheless, a great night for Stone Cold Steve Austin. And we got to see the wild card Mike Tyson trade DX for Austin 316. But that was WrestleMania 14. Next on this list at number 4, we have the previous year's WrestleMania, WrestleMania 13, where Stone Cold Steve Austin took on Bret the Hitman Hart. And it was a mixed amount of fan support because, for whatever reason, despite him being a heel, supposedly, WWE fans began to gravitate towards Stone Cold during early 1997. Despite him being what was supposed to be a heel, fans gravitated because society really was changing at the time, and Stone Cold really related to a lot of people, even though he wasn't really trying to. He was just trying to be his own guy. But a lot of people began to like that. And people weren't really big on, people were getting tired of tradition with the vitamins and prayers. Nothing against the vitamins and prayers, but people were against the tradition and they wanted to see a much more rebellious, sinister side of society. And Stone Cold helped embrace, reminded people of that, and he helped relate to that. So, not to mention, Bret Hart was becoming somewhat of a complainer at the time. I understand, rightfully so. He was frustrated. He was getting screwed out of a lot of matches, but a lot of people said he was upset about some stuff in real life as regards to wrestling. But nonetheless, because of Bret Hart's frustration and him expressing his frustrations, which a lot of people got annoyed by, a mixed reaction record. Not to mention, with frustration not being the word, this is just BS. So, great match at WrestleMania. I really enjoyed the match. It was great on both ends, and it had some brutality. Ken Shamrock, an MMA fighter, was just coming to WWE and would be the special guest referee for this special submission match. And so, speaking of submission match, I did a dream match, dream booking fantasy warfare between Bret Hart versus Kurt Angle and reviewed what a great fantasy warfare that would be. So if you haven't already, check that out and let me know who your pick would be. But this match was great, and what made this match so special was how Stone Cold Steve Austin, despite being bloodied, refused to tap out to the sharpshooter. He passed out from the pain, but Stone Cold, being so tough, being the toughest SOB as they like to call him, decided he would rather pass out than tap out. Bret Hart won via TKO, but Stone Cold got extra respect that night. Not to mention, that was the night Bret Hart turned heel by attacking Stone Cold after the match, and Shamrock had to slam Bret to get him off of Austin. Bret Austin got a lot of respect and solidified himself as an anti-hero face at the time. That is, if anti-hero face makes any sense. If it doesn't, my apologies. But either way, let's move on to number 3. We have Stone Cold versus Dude Love at Over the Edge 98 with Mr. McMahon as the crooked special guest referee. But thankfully, again, one of my all-time favorites, this year's Hall of Famer, The Undertaker, decided to be special guest enforcer as he was taking a break from his angle with his brother Kane and Paul Bearer. Great match. Despite Mr. McMahon's crooked ways, Stone Cold Steve Austin defeated Dude Love to retain the WWE Championship, and the match was one of those Peter Griffin versus the Chicken. I'm not much of a Family Guy fan, but it reminded me of Peter Griffin and the Chicken because they fought all over the place. They even fought in the demolition stage area because that's what the stage area looked like, a demolition derby. Kind of like what you would see at an Armageddon pay per view in the early years. But either way, great match. Mr. McMahon kept changing the stipulations in the middle of the match, which gave us more entertainment for them to fight all over the place. But nonetheless, Stone Cold defeated Dude Love, like I said, and we got to see action from The Undertaker choke slamming the Stooges. Gerald Briscoe and Pat Patterson got rest of soul through tables, and an unconscious Vince McMahon was made to count as Stone Cold took his hand and just 1, 2, 3 for the victory. Stone Cold retains. That was fun to watch. The last two matches took place at a WrestleMania. This particular, at number two, this one that I have at number two was set to be number one, but when I tell you what number one is, you'll understand. At number two, we have Stone Cold Steve Austin versus The Rock at WrestleMania 17. Now, I'll say this, Stone Cold and The Rock, those two were some of the top rivals of the Attitude Era. And when you get those two together, you get magic. Period. Those two together are like ice and water, like gravy on mashed potatoes, or whatever you want to describe it. It is that. Just completely awesome. We saw the best of both moves. We saw Stone Cold pull out a move that was made famous by Ted DiBiase, which gave to Stone Cold. Fun fact, today's 316 day. Fun fact, Ted DiBiase left WWE for WCW based on what I heard. Ted left WWE for WCW because of his faith. Because to him, I don't think it was meant to be a mockery, but to Ted DiBiase, who is a born again believer, that phrase, Austin 316, to him was mockery to God. And I don't necessarily think he was trying to mock God. He mocks God! He mocks God! I'll never forget that. Thank you, Joey Styles. Either way, the match between those two at WrestleMania was great. We saw both of them use the sharpshooter. Stone Cold used Ted DiBiase's $1 Million Dream Hold. Nonetheless, no one expected the way it ended to end that way, because Stone Cold aligned himself with Mr. McMahon to win the match. And of course, we'll never forget JR's commentary. For the love of God, Stone Cold has sold his soul to Satan himself. For the love of God, someone tell me this is not happening. Son of a biscuit, son of a biscuit, son of a biscuit, I can't believe this, my God. Stone Cold, I thought I knew this man. JR was hot. It was amazing. Shocking ending, but nonetheless, an amazing match. WrestleMania 17 was set to be the number one pick for my favorite matches with Stone Cold. But due to certain situations, and this is the emotional part, due to particular situations, I have to include this match to be number one. And that was the match between Stone Cold 1 year later at WrestleMania 18 against the late Scott Hall. Now, we all know about the poison that Mr. McMahon injected WWE with, and it was the original creators of the NWO, Hall, Nash, and Hogan. This match was supposed to be somewhere between number 3 and 2. But as we all learned recently, Scott Hall passed away just yesterday, right before just a few hours before Raw. And Kevin Nash somewhat confirmed it when he said that his family was going to take him off life support and he was going to lose a friend because, as we heard over the weekend, he was on life support. But nonetheless, out of tribute, my number one pick is Stone Cold versus Scott Hall at WrestleMania 18. And ironically, I kid you not, I watched that match Saturday. Scott Hall was on life support Sunday afternoon, but I watched, ironically, that match between those two on Saturday night. And Friday night, I kid you not, I watched WrestleMania 10, which means I saw Razor Ramon versus Shawn Michaels in the classic um, ladder match at WrestleMania 10. So, ironically, Friday night and Saturday night, I watched some of the best WrestleMania matches from Scott Hall. And this match was great. I will say this, I was very fortunate enough at 7 years old to have seen this match on pay per view. Someone had it on pay per view and I saw it and I'll never forget it. And I'm forever grateful that at 7 years old I got to see that. And another fun fact, my first episode of SmackDown was when Stone Cold Steve Austin kidnapped Scott Hall. That was my first episode of SmackDown, believe it or not. But either way, great match. I really enjoyed that match. And let's not forget, even though Stone Cold won that match, Scott Hall sold the heck out of that stunner. It took two stunners. The second one was a heck of a sell, by the way. That was better than, I don't know if I would say it was better than how The Rock sells it, but it was an interesting sell. With that being said, let me go on ahead and say this before I close out. Shocking to find out that Scott Hall passed away, but I send my thoughts and my prayers to his family and everyone who was affected by this tragedy of Scott Hall passing away. I send my thoughts and prayers to the family, and I want to say one person who will be happy to see him is Owen Hart, because if most of us remember, Scott Hall knocked out or kicked a comedian's butt for saying a stupid joke about Owen Hart, because there's just certain stuff you don't joke about, period. And that so-called comedian should have got the razor's edge through a table, because you don't make fun of somebody who died in that matter. So I know Owen is going to be one of the first to thank Scott Hall in heaven, and I hope there's some toothpicks on a golden plate, as Nash said. I will leave you with this. What is your favorite Stone Cold match? Let me know in the comment section below. That's all the time I have for you today. And remember this, hard work pays off, dreams come true. Bad times don't last, but bad guys do. That's all the time I have for you today, guys. Stay strong, Chico. This one's for you. See you next time, everyone.